All right, we are recording now. And so, first, I would like to say good morning to both of you and to everybody who is joining us today. Welcome to the conversation that we have been having for a few weeks here at Planning Roots. We hope you are joining in on the conversation and that you're finding opportunities to have your own conversation. I'm Rachelle Whitfield, I'm the marketing team lead. I am a Army veteran and a Army wife, and we are currently stationed in Camp Humphrey, South Korea. I am a biracial woman. I am half Black and half white, but I do consider myself a Black woman. I've been raised in a Black community. My mother's white and my father's Black, but we had a much stronger connection with my father's family. And so today I have with me Kelli and Denise, part of our Planning Root team. And I'm going to have them go ahead and introduce themselves to you. So Kelli, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about you and your military connection and how you're a part of Planning Roots.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here today, Rachelle. As Rachelle said, I'm Kelli Baker. I am also an Army veteran and an Army spouse. I met my African-American husband who is currently active duty while I was serving, and we have been married for 9 years now. Together we have a boy who is 6 and a girl who is 4, and we are stationed in Fort Gordon, Georgia. And I actually just joined Planning Roots about a month and a half ago as a writer on the staff here.
Oh, exciting and welcome. Thank you for joining us. And so Denise, you tell us about you and your connection to the military and Planning Roots.
So my name is Denise Jolly. I've been married to my husband we just celebrated 15 years. He was active duty for almost 14 years. He's going through the medical retirement process right now. We kind of had a 2-year pause where the initial retirement happened, and now we're kind of, I think, closing out that case. So a little bit of still chaos going on there that comes with all of that. But I never served, but I always served alongside him, whether it was at the chapel or FRG kind of things. We have 2 boys, a 10-year-old and an almost 9-year-old. We retired. We're from Dallas, Texas originally, but we decided to retire here and stay in Columbia, South Carolina. And my really kind of racial history is, I grew up in a Black family. Kind of the American Black story with my mom. I grew up with a single mom. Didn't really know my father's heritage. I recently discovered, I always knew that there was a racial mix in my family. So I recently kind of discovered that I am 40% Irish, and then Native American, and then African American. So it explains a lot of things, I was born with red hair and freckles, but it was just kind of that's just who you are. So, but yeah, that's my story and that's my background. So I guess there's some parts of me that have had a classic Black experience, but other parts that definitely did not. And always, I think, kind of struggling to kind of find my identity and who I was. But my husband is Black, and obviously both of our boys are as well.
Okay. That's very good. And so it's actually funny. We recently did our DNA profile too. And I actually had a lot more European in me than we were expecting. So that was an interesting find. But I was born in the late 60s. Don't start counting on your fingers. I'm only 29, but I was born in the late 60s. So that was a really tough time actually for my mom and dad. So when they actually first fell in love and got pregnant with me, they couldn't even get married yet in Missouri because the Loving law had passed, but it had not made it to Missouri, and it had not become legal in Missouri for interracial couples to marry. So I was a couple of years old before they got married, and my mom's parents weren't very happy about that. So that's why we didn't have quite the connection with her side. Now that we're older, I do know my cousins. We're a little bit closer with my cousins. And I did get to meet my grandfather before he passed away. And so, but I just didn't know that side of family before. It was just all my dad's family that's, you know, where we were connected at. And so I had a really wide, you know, experiences too, being biracial, being in a Black community. Often I wasn't Black enough. But then when we moved to the white community, we kind of, we say my dad made it and we moved on up, and we moved to the suburbs. Um, they knew I was different too. And of course I have a fair complexion. And actually they call me the chameleon because no matter where I am, I kind of blend in. If I'm in Texas, they think I'm Hispanic. If I'm in Hawaii, they think I'm Hawaiian. So I can kind of blend in. But that's always been a frustrating question, that was always the first thing that people wanted to know, what are you?
Yeah.
And I thought as I grew older, I thought that would go away, that it would not be important. But now I'm in my 50s and I still get that question, even in the military community. So Denise, it'll be interesting that as we talk about the experiences that we have in our military community, and now as you transition into more of a civilian community, what kind of experiences do you have within just being out in the civilian world? So actually, Denise, can you tell us about what kind of experiences did you have in the military? Have you experienced any racial differences or
I
challenges?
think, I think my challenge, even beyond the racial identity, was just, I think like you hit the nail on the head when you said, Rochelle, like, I'm kind of a chameleon. And like the way I grew up, and I guess I should explain that background, is if you know anything about Dallas, I grew up in Carrollton, Texas, you know, in the 80s and 90s. And so for a very long time, even though there were other Black kids in my school, maybe there was only one or two of us in a classroom of 20. And so even and my mom did that, you know, because she wanted me to have the better education, wanted me to be in a safer neighborhood, but that also meant that there wasn't a lot of Black culture around me. And so, and it wasn't really until I hit middle school where kind of all the schools kind of merged together, there was more exposure to the Black community and Black culture. And so I very much grew up where, kind of like you in the middle, where it was, I wasn't white enough for the white kids, but I wasn't Black enough for the Black kids. You know, like I grew up listening to Nirvana, and I grew up listening to Eagles and Prince and that kind of stuff. You know, with a little bit of funk and soul mixed in because of my grandmother. And so when I get to the military, and this is how I've grown up, and I can remember even being in college where my husband and I met, like our circle of friends, which we took pride in, was nobody looked the same. You know, like his best man is Indian, you know, from India, and my maid of honor was Hispanic. And like, so our circle of friends, it was never all Black or all white, or we were very diverse. And, you know, so here comes this, clearly not all African American, so I can't identify with one side or the other, girl with tattoos, you know, kind of new in her faith in some ways. Even though I was saved at 4, I didn't really have that biblical truth and walking in it until, you know, we kind of got into the military and I had that mentorship. And so for me, it was both sides of the fence, where I had these women who didn't look like me, who didn't identify with me, who didn't have the same background, who embraced me. But then on the same token, I had situations where I knew that there were reasons why I didn't get positions on boards, because I had tattoos, because of the color of my skin, because I didn't fit the mold. And so, I mean, I can remember at one point I was crying to one of my mentors and I was like, why won't they give me the position? And she was like, honey, I don't know. But I knew, like, I think, you know, between her and I both, we kind of knew that there was a certain reason why, because that collective group of women, they all looked the same, they all talked the same, they all acted the same. And then here comes this, you know, loudmouth, very strong opinionated woman who's got tattoos, who looks nothing like you, and I'm going to challenge you. And so I've kind of had it on both sides, where I've been completely embraced by people who I thought I was going to be rejected by. And then where I've had the opposite, where I walked out of that room knowing, partly because the color of my skin, partly because of the fact that I have tattoos, and that because they couldn't put me in a box, that I'm not going to get a position or be able to do certain. And so I think ultimately I struggled. Our last few years of active duty, that being PWC president, I truly had like an identity crisis because I tried to shape myself to fit the mold that I felt that they wanted me to represent. And I struggled as a leader. And I remember one of my mentor, Titus ladies, pulling me aside and she said, you have to realize that God has put Denise in this position. And I need you to be the Denise who God has designed you to be. And I remember like that was like a click in my head that my identity is not in my skin color or the music I listen to or the way I grew up. My identity is clearly in who Christ has made me to be. And there are little bit of snippets of me that are me and make me unique. And so I remember like that next week I came to the chapel and I had like purple hair and everybody was just like, what? But it was just like, I felt so free. And I remember like someone on my board that year was like, I don't know what happened, but she's like, you just changed. She's like, it's amazing to be under your leadership now. She's like, your confidence is there. And it was because I truly had to let go and not worry about what they were going to think about me. And just staying firm in who I was in God.
Yeah. That's really interesting that you say that. I think I've actually experienced that same confusion. And so although because I'm not as outspoken, although I am an outspoken person, if you ask most people who know me, but I do, when I get into that environment, I'm that chameleon. And so I can become that person that everyone thinks I should be. And so that was a challenge. And you know, really within our women's ministry, I've seen that a lot. That was one of the things when we first came into the military. It was really interesting how segregated we were, because we attended the gospel service, but I was very active in PWOC, being on the boards, being in on the regional board. And I always wondered, why weren't we more, blended? Why weren't more of our gospel service participating? Because we were in overseas location, so there wasn't like they were working and they couldn't come. It was just they were choosing not to. But then when I reflect on it, though, like I think in the military as a whole, we were in a bubble. And so like, especially for our youngest son, I will say, we feel like he was raised in that military bubble that there's all races, all colors, and we all have to work together in that. So then he got to rural Georgia college, a little small Christian college in rural Georgia, and he didn't know he was Black. So that was a transition for him, and definitely a fear as a mother, and definitely a conversation that Dad had to have with him on how to respond to the police. Because, I mean, for us, he was raised as a Christian. So, he, hallelujah night, he might go as a police officer because they were the good guys. So that was a hard conversation that, at 18 or 19 years old to have was that, okay, so yes, he was a hero then, but we have to kind of be careful on how we do that now. So Kelli, I think you even bring a different experience to it, being a interracial couple. Kelli, so what has been your experience in the military community?
Well, I think that we, as a community, we reflect our leadership. And so when I say that, I mean that as a whole, the military prides itself in leading in societal changes, such as integration back in 1948. However, here we are nearly 75 years later, and only 2 of the 43 top 4 stars are Black males, and only 2 are white women. And so that's completely disproportionate to the military force as a whole. And so as you kind of break it down to local level, in our PWOC here, it's not, it's very segregated, as you mentioned. I remember just this past year going to a women's conference, and literally you walk in and this side is all white women and this side's Black women. And I identify with, I love all. You know, and so I was like kind of torn. Do I sit with the white women or do I sit with the black women? And then there, you know, the stigma that comes with that, you know, but, and so I've really had to, I struggle with that pull from both sides with that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that draws me to Planting Roots is that we are a very diverse team.
Yeah.
And so it has just been amazing. And just the conversations that we have had over the last few weeks of trying to connect and understand each other, understand where each other were from, and then growing together in Christ and becoming united in that. And then our whole mission is military women. And so reaching military women where they are so that they can be planted. So is there anything that, as you look back at your walk and as we move forward, that you could share, or that you wish other women that's coming behind you would know of, how maybe they could cross that line, how they could make it a more united community within our military communities?
I think for me, and I think again, it's just because the way that I was raised, and the understanding, and even in a biblical sense, to understand that we have to reach out and that we are not above and beyond learning from someone who looks different from us. You know, and I think often we hear the thing like, you know, we think about Titus positions, like they're often older women. In my experience, they've been older white women, or older black women, but even then there's no unity in that. You know, it's I either got one or the other. And so learning that I can learn from my sister who looks nothing like me, who may be 19 and I'm about to hit 40, that there are life lessons that I have to learn, that I can grow from in learning that, and understanding that there's beauty in our diversity, and that I have to be willing to actually sit and listen to a person and not immediately judge them when they approach me if I don't know them. Because if I had done that, there have been so many situations where I would have missed out, where I would have missed out on mentorship. You know, I talked about my mentor, my first mentor in PwC. You know, she comes from a very historically racist town in Texas, you know, but she stepped across that divide and she saw this young black mom who was struggling, walking into the chapel looking all kinds of a hot mess, you know, with the, you know, with a 10-month-old and then newly pregnant in a foreign country, but she loved on me. And, you know, from her, I learned, you know, what biblical womanhood meant. But if I had let my fears, you know, to hear her accent and know where she was from, if I had let those fears guide me, I would have missed out on so much, you know, and so many beautiful things. But at the same time, I think we harm ourselves. I can say this, like, I've seen it in the Black community, like when you brought up Rachelle, like how, you know, you guys went to the gospel service, but then they weren't participating. Some of that is a willingness of our own to self-isolate, in that we hold so much pride in our identity in, well, I'm Black and this is what we do as a Black culture and the Black community. And I think you have to stop doing that, because I'm just not Denise Jolly, who's a Black woman who has a little bit of Irish in me. I'm Denise Jolly, a daughter of the King first. Yes. And so if my sister, who maybe she attended Protestant service, we have something to share, then we need to be together in sharing that. And so, and I think, you know, the Bible never says to us, once you are saved, I'm a daughter of Christ. It doesn't say once I'm saved, I'm a daughter of Christ, and then I have to choose to be Southern Baptist and adhere to those practices. And so I think that we have so much to gain and learn, that we just have the ability to let go of the labels and reach across the table and go, you know what? I think you're cool. I like your glasses. I like your curly hair. Look, we relate in that. Yes. Hey, let's have a conversation. Like, let's start with just something simple that we can see in each other and have a conversation and reach out. And I can honestly say there's so many times in my life where I can look back and realize that I was probably scarred more by the Black community than I was any other race, which probably sounds weird to some people, but I truly have been isolated or picked on for not looking or speaking a certain way.
Right.
And so we just have a lot to learn. And I think that we have a one up because we are saved and because we have Christ. Like, we have that identity first, and we need to look beyond that and move beyond the categories that this world puts on us.
Very good. That's awesome.
I
How about
think
you, Kelly?
I think Denise made some excellent points. I love how you say that we have to have conversations with each other. I think so many times we like you said, segregate ourselves, isolate ourselves. But whenever we actually step outside of our comfort zone and we have conversations with women we may not normally engage with, we find that we are more alike than we are different. And I love how you say, just point out, hey, I like your glasses, or I like your hair. And that always will break the ice. And I think will open up when I get a compliment, I'm like, oh, okay. And then that will make me like really want to get to know this person. You complimented me. And so I think that goes very far in trying to build relationships. What brings to mind is basic training. So in basic training, it's very stressful. And so when we get into stressful situations, we tend to drift toward what we're familiar with. So we segregated ourselves. However, throughout basic training, we had shared hardships, shared experiences. We were able to build relationships, and it wasn't always easy. There were arguments and there were just, disagreements, but what it did is it forced us to learn how to communicate effectively beyond our differences. Mm-hmm. And in the end, we left the tribal mentality behind and we came towards more of a team mentality. And I think that that's what we need to do as military women, as Christian women, is stop trying to, like you said, put everything in a box, and let's just include all. But it does take bravery and it does take courage, because it's not always, I'm thinking of my own personal experience. It's not always comfortable to walk up to an older Black woman who has been at PWC for 25 years and say, hey, I'm Kelly. I want to get to know you. Or, that's not always easy. But I think that's that first step of faith that it takes.
Yeah. And I think with that comes, or as I thought through the process, that it comes with being intentional about it.
Yeah.
And just stepping out of your comfort zone. It's been really interesting that we're having this conversation right now, and our Wednesday evening PWOC Bible study for this summer is the most diverse group I have ever seen. It's so interesting. Mm-hmm. We have about 12 ladies that have been coming faithful, which that's like a praise as it is in an evening study. But we have Asian ladies, we have 20-year-olds, we have Black ladies, we have 50-year-olds. And so it's just been amazing how in this time, in this place, God has brought this unique women together. And then what even makes it interesting is when we're having this conversation is that, and I meant to have it with me right in my Bible, is that we're studying Ephesians. And so this week we were in Ephesians 2. And when we, as prepping up into getting into the Ephesians, it talks about how in the Bible where there's two type of peoples. They were Jews and Gentiles. Mm-hmm. There were no Black people, white people, Asian people. We were all humans, and we were divided by the Jews and Gentiles. And we are actually in the chapter in Ephesians when God takes that away. He unites us as one, and we're no longer separated as Jews and Gentiles. We are now one under Christ through the blood of Jesus. And that's just how we have to live out our life on those promises that he gave, that he tore that away. He didn't divide us any longer. Now we are one, children of God. It's like you said, we are his queens, we're his princesses. The king is our father. And we just have to keep that in mind and be intentional and grab that person. I mean, coffee is universal. Tea is universal. So just inviting someone that you just, like you said, you look at them and say, oh, their hair is cute. Hey, you want to go for coffee? So just being intentional about that. And so I'm so thankful that we continue to have these conversations. And so we encourage you guys to be part of the conversation. Drop any of your feedback in our comments here. Invite somebody out for coffee, a group of people for coffee and tea, and have the conversation of how you can be united within your communities as sisters in Christ. You guys, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Thank you for getting up early.
Thank you
And
for
thank you for
having me.
being part of the conversation. And I encourage you to continue the conversation in your communities and join us on our social medias, because you have so much wisdom that we can share with sisters that are following us or want to connect with us. All right, guys, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.